This is ChangeMakers with Katie Goar, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
Today's changemaker is Whitney Hill, co-founder and CEO of SnapADU, one of San Diego's leading accessory dwelling unit builders. Whitney, through SnapADU, is helping reshape how California thinks about housing, not through massive towers or billion-dollar mega builds, but one backyard at a time. Whitney, welcome to ChangeMakers.
Katie, thank you. Appreciate it.
It's an honor to have you here, and everybody knows the acronym ADU, and so I'm so excited to actually hear the details about what's happening in San Diego. Tell us how your intersection with ADU and how you all came together. Let's start from there.
Happy to. Thanks, Katie. And really an honor to be here as well. So we started SnapADU in 2020, just after the state of California adopted the more sweeping ADU regulations that made it easier to build. So my background was in operations management and strategy. Prior to just starting my own ventures, I worked in corporate America for about 10 years at a supply company and then at Bain and Company, where I was able to learn about what best in class looked like and really hone some of my operational and process skills. So I took that toolkit with me when I founded my own business in 2016, when I was investing in real estate properties. And through that process, I got a little bit more in the weeds on the construction side, realizing that if we were going to scale something, that we needed to have something more buttoned up there. So that was where I started learning about construction specifically. And so when I heard about the ADU law change, it seemed to me that since the bottleneck would no longer be the regulatory piece, the bottleneck would probably be contracting capacity. So I was keeping my ear to the ground and came across some folks talking about ADUs locally and introduced myself. And by way of that network, I met my co-founder, who was just starting to focus in that space as well. So our skill sets collaborated well to allow us to start to build Snap. So in the last 6 years, we've now completed 100 ADU builds, actually in the ground, not just, plan sets designed or anything like that, actual builds. So we have focused explicitly on San Diego detached new construction ADUs. So in doing that, we were able to build a niche for ourselves pretty quickly. And I think the reason that Snap is fairly well known in our region and across the state is because we make it a point to publish a lot of information. So whatever we find out through all of our discussions with the regulatory entities in the cities, we try to make that available for others who are working on their projects.
How did you come up with the name? Because when I hear it, I think of snappy, like speed. But how did the name originate?
Yes, that's what's one of the main components, making it a snap to build your ADU easier than elsewhere. And at the time, we were experimenting with components, possibly doing wall panels. So we also like the subtext of maybe snapping together. Now that said, we are a traditional stick-built contractor at this time. We've evaluated the merits of going with panel or modular over the years, and it's never quite penciled out. The savings and time reduction wasn't there. So we do continue to be just traditional stick-built construction. So the name is more about making it a breeze, a snap to build your ADU.
Nice. So you mentioned you're in San Diego. Lots of people know the tension in housing across the country, but specifically California gets a lot of attention, the price dynamics and the land and so forth. But tell us what's happening in the market in San Diego and how not just that regulatory window has opened, but even the market conditions lend itself for what you're doing. Explain some of that.
Sure. So the housing supply here, as with much of the coastal regions, is not keeping up with demand. So many folks are looking to get creative with how they are housing relatives or adding rental units to capitalize on that opportunity. And that's where we've really seen the demand for ADUs, which actually coincided too with COVID as we were starting up. So we actually started Snap ADU the same day that California got shut down in 2020. So as part of that, there was a mindset shift too around what does an ideal living situation look like? What are people willing to kind of flex on when they're thinking about that? So with demand for families, we do see folks wanting to access these higher end neighborhoods that would otherwise be inaccessible. So either accessing rentals in those areas or joining a family already on a property there. So we see a lot of that demand fueling the ADU market here in San Diego specifically. And then I would say too that it's just part of the portfolio strategy for smaller real estate investors who already have a cash flowing property in a coastal area, they want to add that second or even third unit. So those are a lot of the dynamics that we see behind the demand.
Who's your typical buyer? I mentioned in the intro that it pretty much can be anything from a parent, an aging parent, to possibly this next gen worker housing. But is there an ideal buyer, or is it just anybody? Explain to us who is buying an ADU right now.
Yes. So I would say the folks adding ADUs are probably a 60-40 split between folks looking to add rentals to their property. It's probably 60. And then about 40% is for family usage. And like you mentioned, out of that family split, it's about half half with aging family versus younger family trying to access that property. With the rentals, then some folks are adding them as furnished rentals. I would say that's probably around 20% of that portion, and then the rest would be just regular, annual leases, that sort of thing. As far as SnapADU specifically, though, we do skew towards folks who are looking for more turnkey experience. We are design, perma, build under one roof. So for folks who are looking for more of a DIY experience, looking to subcontract it, some of it themselves or manage some of the job, that's not who we appeal to in the market. We appeal to those more like working professionals who are looking to have a hands-off experience on getting that ADU in their yard.
Typically, when there's new construction, there is a tension in the neighborhood to say how much parking, how much traffic, what's the neighborhood character going to change like. They're saying things from being in the neighborhood. Is there tension like that when you're trying to bring ADU units to a neighborhood?
I would say that most of that tension, especially what you'll see in the news, has stemmed from the bonus program that the city of San Diego allowed that's beyond the state requirements. So, in certain scenarios, you could add additional ADUs beyond just the one on, say, a single family property. And there were a few situations where a single property with one home on it ended up having proposals for more than 100 ADUs. And I know that sounds insane, but it actually happened in a few cases where there were, say, 24 duplexes top and bottom. Now, that had massive blowback. It actually led to a reevaluation of not just that bonus program in San Diego, but also just the baseline rules. So that's usually where the tension is. We, again, don't do that kind of work. It's more the ones, twos, threes on a property. And so long as it's with the character of the neighborhood, we don't really get that kind of pushback. Where you do see it in the news, especially, would be for those much larger developments that were not really the spirit of the ADU law, I would say. There is still concern, about parking and congestion in neighborhoods, but I would say too that part of that is our job to, as practitioners in this space, to guide a property owner around what's going to be suitable for their unit. And that's not just,
Mhm.
necessarily a numbers optimization. That might also be quality of life. You do want to add parking, even though it's not required because your tenant will pay more for it. So we do have a lot of folks who look to add those kinds of features and be thoughtful about the development, even though they could technically be doing more, they choose not to.
Mhm. What are the numbers as far as how many units are needed? How many units in the pipeline can the city handle, or what are they trying to achieve? Are there any type of analytics that are saying, hey, we could build today, or we need to build over the next few years? Are there some numbers out there?
There are some numbers that are targeted by each jurisdiction. So from the state, what they have as like their housing goal numbers. Now, I don't know all those off the top of my head, but as far as I guess other measures of capacity, several cities publish what their review timelines are, and how
Mhm.
long of a queue if you submit plans, and what does that look like. So that's improved drastically over the last few years as cities have figured out their process for handling ADUs. So we don't see that as much of a bottleneck at this time. I would say more of the challenge with capacity and kind of like getting these through and built as fast as we would like, it's more around the consistency of the application of the law. So it's not even that regulations are changing so rapidly, they are, but a bigger thing is about how it's being enforced locally. Things like fire code that can have discretionary interpretation where it's hard to get a straight answer before you actually submit to the city, which then leads to rework and longer timelines during that process.
Mhm.
So that's one of the bigger capacity type constraints that we deal with.
Mhm. Philosophically, are you seeing, just the community be more embracing of ADUs as people are learning? Or is there a philosophical switch that still needs to happen, so to speak?
We're there. I would say that that shift has already been made in California. So not only during the last 6 years, but even prior to that, you would see ADUs sporadically throughout the state. So I think we're there. Again, where the blowback was with some of those bonus programs, and ironically, that actually had the impact of making folks look at the other ones more favorably. Like, oh, a traditional, family sort of ADU is great. Like people got even more appreciative of that kind of development. I also think as you see more of these in place for longer, we start to see them in housing supply when things go back up for sale in the market. So the more of those comps that we have in the inventory too, and the more financing that we have available for different kinds of options, all of that makes it more appealing to the average homeowner. And we also see that taking off in neighborhoods. It is always harder to be sort of the first one in an HOA, for
Yeah.
example. So for sure, we've faced bigger headwinds when we know we are one of the first ADUs in a neighborhood.
Yeah. You mentioned an interesting piece, I think, of wealth building tools that ADU can help people come into this wealth building dynamic. Maybe they can't buy their first home at 1.5 million or whatever the average San Diego price is for a home. But they can get into a market. They can demonstrate some wealth building. Are you seeing that be a component that is attracting a buyer, or what's happening there?
Definitely. We see some examples of folks purchasing properties with the intent of adding an ADU so they can create that income stream on their property and access something they would not have been able to afford otherwise. I'd say that's the biggest one. We also see some folks deciding to downsize from their existing home into an ADU and
Mm,
renting out the main
okay.
home. So various takes on that, but lots of different folks are taking advantage of it as an opportunity. And again, it pencils out differently in different areas. The more inland you go, the returns look different, of course, because our build cost doesn't really go down out there, but the rental rates don't quite support the same economics. So we do see more of that happening more in coastal areas.
Mhm. Are there any fun stories about multi-generational living that you've come across where people, I think of our own aging parents that we've had to help. And, if there was access to an ADU, it may have changed some dynamics that it would have opened up some opportunities. And I'm just thinking of my own story here, but have you seen anything like that play out or really good multi-generational living stories that you could share with us?
Yes, there's so many. But to pick, I guess, a couple, we've seen examples where folks were getting ready to have their first children, and there was, some nervousness around that with how are we going to handle childcare and both be working. So a solution we've seen several times is to build the ADU in the backyard for grandma to move closer to help with the kids, but then also to help her in her old age. So we've seen several of those play out, and then you'll also sometimes see the younger couple sort of moving into that ADU because they don't have kids yet, right? So they'll move into the
Mhm.
smaller unit. Mom and dad will stay in the primary. And then the intent is to switch that housing arrangement once the grandkids start coming. Then the older couple downsizes into the ADU. The younger family now moves into the main house. So we've also seen folks who explicitly are planning for that kind of a transition when they're thinking about how they want to structure their ADU design and build. So lots of different combinations there, but the stories are always heartwarming. And pretty much the universal message we hear is, I just wish we'd even done it sooner. We did a retrospective last fall when we completed our 100th build. So we surveyed a bunch of our homeowners. About a third of the ones we'd ever done replied. So it was a decent, sample size. And overwhelmingly, the value that families felt that they got from the ADU was the same or higher than what they had anticipated going into that project. So definitely did not hear anyone saying, I wish I didn't build.
Is there something that has surprised you about the construction process or running a construction company with this particular niche?
Yes. You would think within 6 years that we would have this all dialed in. And the fact is that it changes every week or month. So we still are continuing to evolve to address that. The other reason that it's taking so long to get really good in this space is that the timeline for the overall project is quite long. So on average, from the time someone signs a contract, like let's get started on the design, to the time we hand them the keys, that length has increased every year we have been in business. And it's not for us, getting worse on process. We've dialed a lot in, but there are so many more requirements now than there were back in 2021. Let's say it felt like the Wild West. There was nothing with fire, there was nothing with utility upgrade issues. We were just,
Yeah.
sort of going in there and getting it done. And as the cities and jurisdictions having authority have sort of caught up, it's become much more
Mhm,
cumbersome as far as what's required to
mhm,
get an ADU in the ground. So because of that
mhm.
timeline, there haven't been that many cycles of this. So that's been sort of surprising as well, is really how long it's taken to get this to a point of somewhat of a stable jumping off point. We also see a lot of new entrants every year for that reason. A contractor thinks ADUs seem like an easy space to like go make a buck. And
Right,
unfortunately, there's a lot of that. And they don't see the impacts of their decisions for a year and a half, let's say, right? So they
right.
underbid something, they don't fully vet everything during an upfront feasibility process. And it comes back to bite them during the build when they realize, oh man, I didn't budget for all these utility upgrades or the site prep, all these things that are not very glamorous, but have to be done. So for all these reasons, the learning curve has been steep. So I look forward to a point where our industry has a bit more maturity where we're not constantly having to readjust to the interpretations.
What are the top 3 biggest bottlenecks right now that you're seeing? I mean, is it permitting like you mentioned, or is it the changing construction standards? Like, can you tell us the top 3 bottlenecks?
So I'd say yes, the biggest bottleneck continues to be permitting. And not even because of turn times from the city, those have gotten better. I would say we get comments back within a month in most cases. But that kind of moving target that ends up extending our revisions is one of the biggest hurdles. And I already mentioned things like the fire code and how that's being applied city by city, utility requirements as well. So all those different moving pieces needing to also get reviewed and permitted on each project, those simply add up. There's a lot of different components involved. So even if the turn time on each one is fairly quick, still adds up to an average permitting timeline of 3 to 8 months in various cities. So that's, I would say, the biggest one. And then, things like on the construction side, we'd always like to go faster, but there are certain realities around whether you're building a 500 square foot house or a 5,000 square foot house, you have to have the same number of trades coming in there to do their job. So there's sort of a floor on how fast these can get built. And it's sometimes surprising to folks that, oh man, it's not that much faster than constructing, a complete custom home.
Yeah. Are there some neat design things that you've seen with an ADU that you want to share with us? I've seen a few features where people have upgraded tile or they've incorporated some outside landscaping to offset, what is just a standard build. And so I was curious if any of those types of aesthetics are making their way in through the design phase.
Yes, we certainly here in Southern California see a lot of demand for having multi-panel sliding doors, sometimes La Cantina doors to open up a certain wall of the home to the outside where they might have a trellis or some other covering to allow sort of an indoor-outdoor feel. So we definitely see that. We'll see an occasional roof deck as well, which are permitted in some cities on ADUs. So especially if you have that coastal view, it's nice to get that access. So we certainly see some of those approaches, and then we see people being creative with the limited footprint that they do have. So things like combining furniture in ways that you wouldn't normally see in a larger home. So having a dining table directly against a couch that's then facing sort of the living area, that works perfectly well in a more compact space. So we see folks being thoughtful with that. We also have seen quite a bit of built-in storage where folks are trying to be more thoughtful with like a nook at the end of the hallway, adding some cabinetry there to make sure that they're capitalizing on the square footage that they do have.
I want to read one of the awards that you've gotten. You were mentioned in San Diego Business Journal's 40 Next Top Business Leaders Under 40. So, congratulations on that. How does it feel, or what does it reflect on your leadership here as a founder or co founder here? Just like, is this something that you wouldn't have expected, or just reflect on that for a minute?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, we earned that when we were about 3 years in. So we were really proud to be recognized as a going concern, that early in our development. So I would say that in some ways, yeah, I was surprised to already be at a point where I felt like I had a valid application for something like that. But I would say that it's a testament to building a business that show that where you show up the way that you want to, and that you're kind of bringing in the elements of what you've seen work in the past. And that's certainly what I've done here at Snap, bringing in elements from different companies that I wanted to emulate now in our business. So it's exciting to see that come all the way to fruition, and also in things like the client reviews that you receive when they mention something that we strive for as a team. It's extremely rewarding. But
Mhm.
there's certainly a lot of exciting companies out there, and I wouldn't say anything we're doing is so earth shattering. A lot of it's pretty unglamorous. Just the blocking and tackling of running a business in a pretty antiquated industry in a lot of ways. So
Mhm.
it's exciting that
Mhm.
you can still be recognized for that, even in a less exciting space.
Mhm. I noticed here that you got your bachelor's degree from Yale and you have an MBA from NYU with a specialization in entrepreneurship. I mention that because sometimes when people go and get their degree, they don't really know what the path is, or, but it seems like your degrees have matched up with the market, have matched up with your talent, and you actually are hitting that professional stride. I don't know, does it feel like that, or, was that part of your professional master plan?
Oh, well, I appreciate that. It does feel like that now. At the time, I had no idea. I was frantically trying to find where I belonged. And so a lot of my initial career, including when I did the degrees, was around trying to get a generalist background because I didn't want to close off any doors. I really didn't want to go
Mhm.
specialize in something because I didn't know what that would be yet. So, no, there was no like grand plan other than I needed to figure out what I was good at. And sometimes it's tricky when you don't have that kind of niche calling. I really wished I had just wanted to go specialize in something, but that wasn't where I was at the time. Now it's such a relief to have my niche. So in
Yeah.
retrospect, yeah, looking back at that was the right degree. It was perfect to kind of prep for this. So I guess in some ways that opened up doors I didn't even know needed to be opened.
Mhm. Well, congratulations on that because not a lot of people are able to merge all of those intersections and really add impact to the world. I mean, or to your San Diego region, because this is a great moment for you personally and professionally, it appears. Uh, Talk to me about San Diego. Is that your guys' niche city, or do you want to expand past there? What's your vision and strategy there?
We do picture focusing here still for the medium term, I would say. So we think that there's still a lot to be learned in a single market before trying to apply that elsewhere. And even in our
Mhm.
county, that covers 15 different jurisdictions. So it's quite a bit of complexity to say go to another county, not another 15. So we want to make sure that we have a really solid foundation before we would consider
Yeah.
that. I would say too, though, that we don't necessarily see geographic expansion as the most attractive way to increase our revenue. There's certainly vertical integration plays that are of interest.
Okay.
Parts of our builds, things like adding a septic system, adding retaining walls. Right now, we outsource a lot of that. There's certainly an argument for bringing some more of that in house, certainly on just the design side. So that's something up in the air that would allow us to get more ADUs in the ground here. And then also, we're still a relatively small, not relatively, we are absolutely a small portion of the market, even though we are the leading stick built contractor out here. So we're something like 3% of the detached ADU market. So
Okay.
easily we can get to a saturation of 3 to 5 times that without starting to hit some sort of a ceiling.
Yeah. Very nice. Well, it sounds like you've got a great market there, in which you will be able to have multiple years of success and continuing to compound on that and build on that. Well, is there anything that we've missed? We've talked about several aspects of your business and what you've accomplished. Anything else you'd like to highlight?
I guess just given the context of the show, Katie, when I was thinking about what we had discussed today, and so much of your focus is around affordable housing, at first glance, it's man, I wish ADUs were that, like, and some are, but in our
Mhm.
particular focus, we're often building things that are at the higher end of the ADU market. So you have to kind of sometimes wonder, how do we make this more affordable? And I think that goes back to what we were just saying about wanting to really hone our craft so that we can bring down costs. And so much of
Mhm.
the bloat in construction is caused by folks making big guesses about what's going to be downstream to sort of cover themselves. So a lot of our focus has been on eliminating that guesswork by doing the work up front. And again, not glamorous and not what people want to hear sometimes, but I think in doing that, we can reduce a lot of the friction of what ultimately raises costs in a market. So
Mhm.
I could see, as we're trying to deepen our footprint here, trying to make our entry level price point more accessible by becoming better at what we do.
Mhm. Well, and it's great to have another option in the market that is allowing some flexibility for people, allowing some rental income, allowing potentially a stepping stone for them into home ownership, possibly. So, we can broaden the definition of what we view as affordable housing by just saying by proxy, ADUs do have a place at that table. So we are very appreciative to companies like SnapADU that can actually bring yet another creative option into the housing marketplace, quite frankly. Whitney Hill, it has been a great pleasure to have you here and to focus on what SnapADU is doing in San Diego. Thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate what you're doing.
Likewise, Katie, thank you so much for having me and for all the kind words. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Goar. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.